Hi, this is Paul. Anyone who's been to a bunch of the different conferences lately will recognize who I'm talking to. This is Sara Eve, and she is Nate Heil's wife. And we're going to have a conversation today.
Hi.
Hi. Well, let's start. I mean, we've chatted before by at various different events, but a lot of people probably don't know you, probably not as well as they know your husband. So I'll just start with the usual question I start with is tell me about the home you grew up in.
So I grew up in the San Fernando Valley in the suburb of Encino, but not the really nice part, not the part that people think of as in the hills and expensive homes. It's a part of the San Fernando Valley that's just like a lot of other parts, just a small subdivision. It was right up against a big flood zone area, so but like a little bit elevated, so we had to never have actual flooding at our house, but the area flooded, and a huge park right back there. And my parents were both educators. I'm the youngest of four. My mom was a stay-at-home mom until pretty much I was in kindergarten. But let's see, my dad taught English, and also when he taught like special ed, like life skills to a point, and he really enjoyed that work. And then
Hmm.
that was transitioned away from the education system to the social services system at some point, and he no longer could do that role. So um, it, it was, I'd say, our household, if you walked in, it would be warm, chaotic. There'd likely be very loud classical music blasting through the stereo. My dad loved all things stereophonic, and lots of books, just way, way, way too many books. And But also chaotic in the sense that my dad was alcoholic. Both of my parents have passed,
Oh.
and my mom, I think, grappled with pretty severe depression on and off. But uh, I feel like my parents instilled in me just so much. They gave me so much love and care, and culture, and really, and Jewish culture too, really encouraged me in terms of my own interest. It wasn't forced on me, but when I was interested, I was encouraged. And of the four of us siblings, two of us have pretty religiously observant-ish, and two are not. So it's kind of interesting. And I know that my dad was born in 29, my mom was born in 34, and they both felt they had some obligation to repopulate the Jewish people
Hmm.
after the Holocaust. So I think four children is a little bit unusual among their friend group or their cohort. Most people had two or three kids.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
Well, was your home life observant? I mean,
Well, I didn't think it was very observant compared to Orthodox Judaism. It
hmm.
wasn't, but compared to just someone who's just strictly culturally Jewish, it was definitely. Um, we most pretty much every Friday night we said the blessings, we lit candles, we had dinner together. I usually didn't like go to football games or anything on a Friday night, except for like one semester when I was in band. Other than that, Friday nights were pretty sacred. And we celebrated all the major holidays. I'd say like the biggest one was Passover. My parents were very welcoming of other people at our Seder table. And my dad loved to lead the Seder because just as an educator, he just really loved it. And my mom and my sisters and I often would help with like cooking and getting
Hmm.
things set up. And Hanukkah was kind of a big deal, and we did not celebrate Christmas at all.
Hmm.
We,
What was that
I
like for you as a kid
well,
in
the
Southern
neighborhood that I grew
California?
up in was pretty much very Jewish.
Oh.
But my best one of my best friends when I was growing up, her family was Christian, and so I would go over there, and I got to celebrate. Like I got to be there on Christmas morning with them and help trim their tree. So I got to experience it as like a, cultural
Yeah.
observation. And my
Mhm.
parents and my dad, and one of the traditions is at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in downtown Los Angeles, like the main like arts center, they would have a free like musical day, like where they had like, Handel's Messiah and all kinds of other music. And that's what we would do on Christmas Day sometimes would be to go and that. So my parents taught me a great like appreciation of
Mhm.
uh I guess what of Christianity in terms of what it's contributed.
Mhm.
And I'm not definitely didn't feel like they had any sort of chauvinism about Judaism being better. It was more like this is ours and other people have their thing.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Now you mentioned your father's alcoholism and your mother's depression. Was that a big thing growing up, or was it a thing just sort of always out there? Did it impact you and your siblings, or
Yeah.
what was that like?
Well, it was a very big thing for me growing up. I feel like now that I'm in my 50s, it's faded a little in its
Mm,
in its importance and where I would put it, but it had a huge impact on me as a young person. I had a like my dad, the way that it manifested was, I'd say maybe once, depending on kind of where things were in his life. Sometimes he'd go
mm,
for 6 months without having like a big blow up, and sometimes it would be like every other week. But when my dad he would go into this mode where he would get drunk and he'd yell at my mom, and it was
mm,
pretty scary. Sometimes my mom would leave and leave me there with my sister and my dad.
mm,
When my older sister moved out, then it was just me with him. So that was
mm.
scary at times.
Yeah,
But my dad wasn't ever, I would say, not physically violent,
yeah.
but it was still very scary. And he was very verbally abusive. And
Mm,
um, I think as I was like a very, just in general, sensitive kid, so
mhm,
it just hit me really hard.
mm,
It's funny, like I think about like I can only remember maybe once or twice that I was spanked, and
mm,
that to me is not anywhere near as traumatic as the alcoholism pieces of
mm,
things. That's more like, oh, that was just parenting, is what it felt like to me. Yeah, not that I just didn't do that with my child, but
yeah,
I recognized it wasn't that dramatic in the grand
yeah.
scheme of things.
Why did your mother hang in there with it?
So a really good question. They were separated for a little while, for about a year or so when I was about 6. And I think what the kind of family lore is, I never really got to ask her directly. She uh, passed away 7 years ago now, I think. But was that just financially she couldn't make it. She couldn't
Yeah.
make it, and she would have had me with her, and we for that year or so that they were separated, we lived in this tiny, crappy little apartment in Sherman Oaks, and I remember that time fondly because I got
Hmm.
more of my mom's attention, and it was quiet and calm. But I think
Hmm.
my parents thought it was really disruptive for me, even though
Hmm.
that's not how it felt to me at the time.
Yeah. Did your parents talk with you about these issues, or were these things that were just sort of going on in the background and you had to read between the lines?
Well, my parents were my dad in particular, but both of my parents really were very interested in kind of pop psychology, I would say. So like
Hmm.
they introduced these like ego, id, super ego type concepts to me, I think at a pretty young age. And so I didn't feel like I could really talk with them directly, and partly it just felt futile to do so.
Hmm.
But we had gone to counseling, we'd gone to family therapy. Sometimes we had a therapist who was really good and helpful, and sometimes we had someone who just took my dad's word for things at face value and
Hmm.
didn't press or didn't challenge it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was tough. It was really hard in a lot of ways, but I think now I'm like, well, it's not that unusual.
Yeah.
Like
No.
it's pretty common, and the ways in which my family was dysfunctional might be kind of specific, but the
Yeah.
fact that they were is not at all
Yeah.
unusual.
So when and what was it like to then leave home?
Well, I was very eager to leave home. When I was in high school, I was in Girl Scouts from like age, you know, 5 through 18.
Hmm.
And that was a really great refuge for me.
Mm,
I really, my parents were not very involved, but there were like the people who were the adults involved were just fantastic and
yeah.
supportive. And so that gave me a little bit of an escape. And I was very, very much ready to leave home. So I went away to college when I was 17, about to turn 18. So
Okay. And where'd you go to
yeah.
school?
I went to UC Irvine for my first year, partly because before, when I was making that decision about where to go, my grandmother was alive and she lived in Orange County, and I kind of wanted to be close to her.
Hmm.
And my best friend at the time was also going to UC Irvine. But when I got there, there was no on-campus housing for people who were not like straight
Mm,
A students. You had to be like academically superior in order
mm,
to get the limited housing. So I lived off campus, and I just did had such a hard time engaging socially. So I
mm.
was encouraged by my college boyfriend to look at transferring to UC Santa Cruz. And so
Oh,
that's what I did. And I had an absolutely amazing
it's a
college
beautiful
experience
campus.
there.
One of my kids
Yeah.
went there. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful, and also just socially just was a really great fit for me.
Mm,
But academically, that year that I spent at UC Irvine was great. That was a really, really
mm.
good learning environment.
So when you went to college, did you continue to practice your religion or did that sort of go on the back burner? What was that for you?
No, it didn't really go on the back burner. I did try to kind of engage with the Hillel that was on campus at Irvine and wasn't very successful. But when I was at UC Santa Cruz, I was very involved in both like the formal and informal Jewish communities there.
Hmm.
And yeah, I did just a lot of activities with Hillel. And I, definitely had the majority of my friends weren't Jewish, but I definitely had Jewish friends that I met through that and who I'm still friends with today. So
What did you study in college?
I started out, I was interested in biology and then social psychology. And then when I went to UC Irvine, UC Santa Cruz, I was really interested in, I kind of, women's studies caught my interest. So I
Hmm.
was majored in women's studies and minored in sociology. And I feel like it was actually pretty rigorous because it was interdepartmental, like it was multidisciplinary study. So I got like, history, sociology, psychology, all kinds of different disciplines were integrated and had really, really excellent professors. So, and we had relatively small classes once you got past like the 101 series. And I had some just really, really great sociology professors too. So, yeah.
So what did you do? What did you do after college?
So my first year after college, I was considering applying to rabbinical school, but I had this question
Oh.
of like, well, so this is 1989. And I thought, well, I haven't been to Israel. It's a big deal. I need to know what that is before I can make any more decisions. So I applied for and got into a program that was a year-long work study program. It was called Project Otzma, but it's, like a lot of other programs, but it was 10 months officially, but so I went to that, and it was 1990. So when we were supposed to leave was when kind of that line in the sand was drawn
Mm,
by President Bush of like, okay, by January, Iraq needs to be out of Kuwait or
mm,
else. And so some people dropped out at that point, but I want to say about 60 or so of us went. We were this great cohort. And we were people, Jewish kids from all over the US and Canada, and a variety of ages. Most were post-college, but there were some who were still college age. And it was an incredible experience, like just fantastic. And then when I was there when the war started,
mhm,
and at the time I was in Jerusalem, and we were in this weird like dorm sort of place with all these Israeli phys ed students. who were just like super duper macho and like didn't want to put on their gas masks. And so it was just, it was intense. But I stayed and then our next sort of placement through the year was in the Negev in the south of Israel. So which was a little bit less impacted
Hmm.
by the Scud missiles. And so well, I was on a kibbutz there. And then my dad ended up having a heart attack
Mm.
about a month after. So I felt fairly guilty, but my parents had been supportive. They were not like begging me to come home or anything. And so so I went home for a bit and then I went back. And then when I went back, I went to this small town. It's actually not that small town in northern Israel called Kiryat Shmona, which it was predominantly not European Jewish, more
Mm.
Jews from Morocco, India,
Huh.
all over Yemen, and so it was a like a an economically developing town. Like it was pretty economically depressed, but it was a great, awesome place. And that's where I met my ex-husband. So
Oh,
I
okay.
met him there, and his family kind of took me in. He has a huge family. He's one of nine kids, and
Wow.
they were all very, very welcoming and spoke Hebrew to me. So I had that immersion experience right away.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
me once with I was with them, it was total immersion.
Well, so did you stay there? Did he come back to the States with you? What happened?
Yeah, so I stayed there. I stayed there for about 7 months after the program ended. And we'd gotten engaged relatively quickly, and we were trying to decide, did we want to get married there? Did we want to get married here? I was 22. I was like, I think now, like, oh my gosh, I was so young. But I was 22, and we talked about getting married there, and my parents kind of put their foot down and said, we will not come there. You guys need to come here. They
Wow.
didn't want to be, they said they wouldn't really be involved if didn't have a chance to meet him, to get to know him. They were,
Yeah.
which I understand. And so we moved to the US and we got married like a month after we moved there. So we got married in January of 1992. And then um the day we got married was the 19th of January, and that's the day my daughter was born, like 20 odd years later.
Wow.
So yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
So I mean
not
some
sorry, not 20.
what did he do for work? What was his background in?
Um, so he worked as a handyman in LA. He worked as in prop like for a property management company. He worked for like a company that did retrofitting when houses were sold and needed to like have their water heaters strapped in
Yeah.
and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So so he was, let's see, he didn't really drive until he came to the US, but then he did. And yeah, it was definitely a bit of culture shock for him, but because
Yeah.
there's a pretty large Israeli community in Los Angeles where we lived, he didn't feel so isolated. Yeah.
What was it like for you? Was it I mean people often don't recognize how much culture they have until they get married because then suddenly you're very intimately confronted with another culture and when it comes to a marriage and a household and a family it can be a lot. So how did that
Yeah.
go?
Yeah. I want to just correct something I said before. I think I said 20 years after. I think it was more like 14 years after we got married that my daughter was born. It's
Oh,
like that
okay.
math, just doing the math. But so my joke about it at the time and still was that I found somebody who was Jewish, but as different from me as possible in every other way. So
Mm,
his family had immigrated from India, from Mumbai to Israel before he was born. He was born in Israel. And the language, his first language was Marathi, the native language that was spoken in his household. And then he learned Hebrew, and then he learned other languages like Dutch and and English. And he just was really quite gifted with, he has been really quite gifted with languages. Um, and so there was culture shock to a degree. Very shortly after like a year after we got married, his father passed away suddenly in
Mm,
Israel, and we didn't arrive in time for the funeral, which was really sad, but we were there for the Shiva period, and then we, kind of were there for another week or so. And when we came back, uh, he really felt compelled to be more practicing. So we
mm,
started keeping kosher. I mean, growing up, I thought my family didn't keep kosher, but now when I look back on it, like it was rare that we ever had meat and milk together. My parents
mm,
didn't buy strictly kosher meat. Like rarely did we have pork and or shellfish in the house.
mm.
So it was like without there being a strict rule about it,
Yeah,
um, it definitely wasn't new to me to eat in that particular way.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so did you now you've talked about a lot about observance in the household, but you haven't talked a lot about, participation in a
Yeah,
synagogue or a temple or something like that. So what
yeah.
did that then up then with him, or was it still more of a private?
Well, so growing up, so I'm 9 years younger than my next oldest sibling.
Mm,
It was not planned, but my dad once said, none of you are planned. So, but my parents when I was born and I was in uh growing up, we didn't belong to a synagogue until I was in about fourth grade. My mom taught at preschools that were Jewish preschools, and so the school that she was a lead teacher at, that's where I ended up going. It wasn't super close to our house. It was in North Hollywood, which is only 15 minutes if there's no traffic. But when does that happen, right?
yeah.
Even back then. So I was involved, and I went to Hebrew and religious school from fourth grade through 10th grade. And I really loved it.
Mm,
I didn't always get along. It's not that I didn't get along. I didn't have a ton of friends there because socioeconomically, we were not exactly the same as the rest of the people there for the most part.
hmm
And also just kind of the dysfunction of my family. It was,
mm,
kind of a little bit hard to integrate in a way.
hmm
But I really did love it. And I was in junior choir and just so I was at services a lot and really loved the music, the singing. That's how I really connected. And then when I was married and we were living in Los Angeles, we lived near Temple Israel of Hollywood, which is a very large Reform synagogue and Reform, but kind of leaning back towards the traditional, I would
mm,
say. Um, and I taught Hebrew school there, and, attended services and again had like a kind of inkling about maybe I want to be a rabbi.
hmm
And so kind of pursued that a little bit, but ended up not getting into rabbinical school, being told like you need to grow a little more. And it
hmm
wasn't an age thing. It was you need to
hmm
mature a little more. You need to be a little bit more knowledgeable in
hmm
your and I at the time I took it really hard, but I understand
hmm
now. And I also think that had I applied to, Reconstructionist or even conservative rabbinical school, I might have gotten in at that point and kind of they would have fostered me along.
hmm
But
hmm
I didn't want to move out of LA and I didn't really feel connected to the conservative movement, particularly at that time. So yeah.
hmm So now in your first marriage, what are you doing for work, or are you staying at home?
So I worked at it was 1992 was really tough to find a job then just out of college, kind of like it is now.
Yeah.
Um, I thought I was interested in journalism. I was interested, and I got a job at the Jewish Journal, which is like one of these weekly tabloid format in terms of just like, that size of a paper. And it's the largest Jewish newspaper on the West Coast, and it
Hmm.
evolved into now like one of the largest sources of Jewish news and information and culture. And it's more, I have an online presence. So when I started there, I started to move up. I started to do some writing and I decided, no, like I can't tell the truth about anything in 400 words. Like that's impossible. Like I'm just not cut out for that. So I ended up going more into the production route, and that led me to become like the founding webmaster of that. So
Oh,
when things were starting, entities,
yep.
newspapers, etc., were starting to be on the web. And I would get into these like really intense arguments with the editor in chief because it's like, why would anybody, subscribe to the paper if they can just get it online? And I was
Yeah.
like, you don't want to be left behind.
Yeah.
You got to
Yeah.
be. And so I don't know. I feel like we were both right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, those transitions are always both and. Some
Yeah.
people would still want the physical paper, and others would want the convenience of pulling up an article, even if they have the paper, to pull it up and read it and share it and so on and so
Yeah.
forth.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah, and then from there I worked there for about 10 years, 8 years, and then I got another job in the web realm,
mm,
of kind of what we would now call kind of content development, but it
hmm
was sort of a mix of like the web design part and like just getting where how to structure the information along with and it's really funny because this was pre-emojis, but we had these little like 8-bit pictures that we put next to different things. So now that I think about it, it's like, oh, those are kind of a precursor. And I don't think I invented them by any stretch of the imagination, but we had them
yeah,
in like, when was that? 99,
yep,
1999. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, if you look at if I was playing around with web stuff too in the late 90s, early aughts, just a different look, different feel, very much from, what we have today. To the degree that, Substack is sort of taking everything over now in terms of web design and blogging and all of that. Now I've got you in your first marriage and you're working this job in LA, and I know at some point we're going to get to a second marriage. So I don't know how you want to navigate that passage or
Yeah. So the entity that I was working for after I worked at the Jewish Journal was Cox Communications, and they had these
oh
six
yeah.
city sites all over. And LA was one of the markets where they had one of these websites, but they didn't have a corresponding paper. So like in Atlanta, they had the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. But in 2001, when everything was crashing, Cox Communications said we're eliminating this whole division. And
Mm,
so they pretty much shut down, laid off like, hundreds of people across the nation. So I was caught up in that. They did a really good job of connecting us with like career services to kind of figure out next steps. And so I had kind of a career coach then, but it was one of the most devastating things, definitely to that point, one of the most
mm,
devastating things I'd experienced. And so
mm.
I really had to
Why?
reflect. That's a good question. I really felt so much of my identity was tied up in my work and
Mm,
my doing this thing that was very productive. Um, yeah, and it felt like it kind of gave me legitimacy in the world that I somehow maybe
mm,
didn't always feel. And then, but I I kind of decided to go in the direction of applying for the School of Public Health. So I
oh,
applied, I went to Cal State Northridge and got my master's in public health. And
oh, that's a big
um,
transition.
yeah, it was. And we had purchased a house in the San Fernando Valley and, were able to make the payments without me having to be working during that time. And I did take out some loans, but I was able to pay them off pretty easily, ultimately, looking back. But, state college, didn't have to take out a ton of money, and my husband was working. And so, when I graduated, was getting ready to graduate, my hope was that I would be pregnant while I was in graduate school. Somehow I thought that would be easier than having an infant and working, which probably not, but but I was able, it was probably the first time in my life that I really like super duper committed myself academically and just
Mm,
really
yeah,
got to go deep in that
yeah.
way. Um, and a kind of another kind of background thing that I haven't mentioned, but it's a really big part of the picture is when I was 25, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, which
Oh,
was much less common. What is that, 30 odd years ago.
yeah.
So I had like, just a lot of tumultuous health, nothing like health impacts, more just psychologically coming to terms
Mm,
with it and also felt like I really needed I felt like, okay, from this point forward, I always need a job that has health insurance. I can't just kind of
hmm.
be out there
Yep.
hanging in the wind. So,
Yep.
that was another. It just felt, yeah, very, very important. But that kind of experience that I had as somebody with diabetes, I thought about becoming a diabetes educator or a dietitian, and then I decided public health was where I wanted to be. But that was a time when chronic disease in public health was emerging more than it had previously. So yeah, so then I had an internship with the California diabetes program. So every state in the nation, hopefully in an ongoing way, but Washington State since 1979, there's the CDC funded program for diabetes kind of coordination and support at the state level.
Hmm.
And so I had an internship with that in California, and that introduced me to that whole world. And I met the person who was the Washington State lead for diabetes. And when I graduated, they had a job opening, and I applied, and I ended up getting. And we were ready to leave LA. We were
Hmm.
either gonna go, we were gonna go somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah. I never really felt at home in LA, even as a kid. Like I just
Huh.
felt out of sync. Like just felt like the materialism,
Yeah.
the status stuff, all just
Yeah.
like I really, really didn't like any of that.
Yeah.
But that's where I ended up for majority of my life.
Of your
So
life, yeah. And Washington
yeah.
culture is quite a bit different.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And there are things I appreciate about California now that I don't live there any longer. And I have, just a huge amount of love for California, for
Yeah.
Southern California, Northern California, all of it. But the size of the town that I live in Olympia is just a really great fit, and it
Mm.
was a great
Yeah.
place to raise my daughter. It was like
Yeah.
just so, so, so good. In the neighborhood that, we lived in the majority of the time, very walkable. She could, it's like half a mile to the elementary school, and
Yeah.
there's a neighborhood bakery, like just super nice. And I kind of had that as a template because my sisters and my brother, who were, quite a bit older than me, they lived in Berkeley and Oakland when I was growing up. So I would spend some summers there. And so I was always like, that's what I want
Hmm.
to live in as a community where I can, walk to the grocery store and the library and the Y and all of
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, well, Olympia is. It's a beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful place. The Northwest Estuary event happened on the campus of a church where, a good friend of mine from college and seminary now pastors, and I went out to lunch with him when the conference was happening, and no, he really raves about the city, loves living in it, and it's sort of, well, Sacramento's changing. Sometimes with these major states like Albany, New York. I mean, what is Albany? And Sacramento, for up until not too long ago, was a fairly small city compared to the massive cities in the Bay Area and Southern California, and Olympia too. These state capitals, they often put them in places that are a little outside the major, of course, you've got the whole Seattle area in the north, which is dominates the state in so many different ways. Well, what happened to the marriage?
So I'm just trying to think where to start with this.
Yeah.
So, my ex-husband, is a very, very, has been a very loving and caring father and, really supportive of me when we were married, but he has a severe mental illness that
Oh,
he had before I knew him, but
yeah.
I wasn't really aware of. And it kind
Oh,
of how it played out when we were in Los Angeles. There were some like signs and signals like there,
yeah.
where I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, that was a manic episode, but I didn't know to label it that. And having grown up in such a chaotic household,
Yeah.
I was like, well, people are just, not always
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So, but my ex-husband was known as like the person my friends would call if they were like stranded by the side of the road or
Mm,
had some like immediate, problem that
yeah.
needed fixing. He
Yeah.
was very, very reliable in that way. And yeah, and had like, we had, and I think that when we moved to Olympia, our daughter was born. He quit smoking cigarettes, and there was just all these changes that led to the escalation of his illness. And
Mm,
when we went to after our daughter was born, we went to visit Israel. He had like a very serious break that was like
mm,
obvious to his family, to me, and to
yeah.
his family, it was like, oh yeah, we're seeing this again. Whereas for me, it was sort of for the first time.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so when we came back, he got diagnosed with bipolar, which it's actually a bit more complicated than bipolar. But so I stuck in there. So from the time that my daughter was 8 months old until she was about 8 years old, I was just really, really trying everything I could think of.
Yeah.
Tried to get him the resources that he needed, tried to
Yeah.
like just stick in there, do
Yeah.
whatever I could. My sister, who's the next oldest in the family, who doesn't have kids and hasn't been married, she ended up moving up and kind of really having my back as a
Mm,
as a
mm.
another sort of parental
Yep.
figure.
Yep. Yep.
So as much as I a lot of times did feel like a single parent, I had her support, and then I had support of people in the community as well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, again, looking back, it's like one of those things. It's like, oh, I understand some things that nobody would understand if they hadn't been through this, if they
Hmm.
hadn't like lived close with somebody
Yep.
and like had to kind of navigate be, how to really separate in that situation. So
Yeah.
currently, our daughter does see her dad about once a week, and he's doing
Okay.
okay,
Good.
I would say. But that's like that between when she was 8 months old and now there have been many, 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 challenges and traumatic things that have happened.
Yeah.
So yeah. So at any rate, so then moved to Olympia, and after we got divorced, we were separated first, and then as our divorces take forever. I don't know if they
Mm,
do everywhere, but certainly here in Washington State, it just takes forever.
mm.
Um, and and it's not about the assets or the kid. It's like the system. So we when I was ready to start dating again, that's when Nate and I met. And I'd been separated for about 2 years at that point, and he
Okay.
was newly separated
Okay.
when we met. And so
How did
and
you meet
and
him?
well, we met online on OkCupid, but immediate like within three conversations we were offline. We were just talking on the phone, so it was not a prolonged online romance at all. It was very short, that part of it. But it was great actually because he's such a great writer. That was part of what drew me in. And I think I think the same for me. Like he's like, oh, this is someone who's funny and articulate. I think I could get along with them. So, and we both kind of stood out in that field of like we were pretty different from most everybody else who was on there.
Okay. Okay. Well, what did you have in common? But the writing, the love of language.
Um, it's a good question what we had in common. I think when we were first together, we would have these really long theological
Oh.
conversations. And at the time when we met, he was kind of in a more agnostic period.
Huh.
And I mean, I knew that he had been at some point Catholic. I knew he'd grown up evangelical. He
Yeah.
was like the first person I'd ever been involved with in a serious relationship who wasn't Jewish. But because my daughter was like already, I felt sufficiently indoctrinated, I wasn't worried about that piece of it. But it just, what we had in common was more like, temperamentally, and just
Mm,
how we think and
hmm.
appreciating like deep questions and all the things that everybody loves about him like stood out to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And he's just such a warm, caring, loving person, a really great
Yeah.
dad, and all those things. And so I don't know that, we like in terms of like hobbies, we didn't overlap at all, like zero
Huh.
overlap. So we had to, adjust a little bit and
Yeah.
try on the other person's things. And then as
Yeah.
he became more involved in the Anglican Church here in
Yeah.
Olympia. It was like, it was a gradual process, and it just, with Estuary, with everything that was happening in this little corner, and he was kind of growing along with it.
Mm.
It gave me time to kind of adapt to, okay, now I'm married to someone who's deeply Christian,
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, and he was always incredibly respectful and admiring of my culture and my background. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
How long were you together before the whole this little corner internet thing? Because he found me because he watched the Grim Chris convert Rando, and that's where he says, things he started
Yeah.
to get involved.
So, we got together in the summer of 2015.
Oh, okay.
We got married in 2019. So it
Oh,
wasn't until 2020, I think,
yeah,
that this, and it was I mean, he probably would not have really engaged as much if the pandemic hadn't been happening.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it was a great way for him to connect with people, and in his like family and friend group, there isn't necessarily, I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but there's not necessarily the same interest in like talking about philosophy
yeah,
and theology. So he was, I think, hungry for that. So it was a great way for him to kind of get that need met, and also I think be recognized for his amazing
yeah,
ability to think in
yeah,
that way.
yeah. Well, and he started Grail Country, and I mean, he's done a lot with that channel. I mean, a number of people start channels, but he's done a lot with it, and he's made quite a bit of it. Now we don't get a lot of wives on the channel talking, because I mean, Sam Tiedemann's wife hasn't come on, Luke Thompson's wife hasn't come on. Um, so how has it been sort of watching as a spouse, watching this whole thing sort of develop?
Um, well, there were, it took a little adjustment because it was like, okay, Saturday mornings are the times when he's going to be recording, and so I can't really schedule anything for us to do during that time, or
Mm,
the time when I may go grocery shopping alone or whatever. But
hmm
I didn't. I think I just saw. I mean, it would be interesting to get his perspective, but I saw how much he was gaining from it and how much it really fed his soul and his
mm,
intellect.
hmm
So that really encouraged me to like be supportive of it.
Yeah,
And then as Estuary unfolded, I mean, I really do love Estuary, and I'm considering starting another separate Estuary group in Olympia because we kind of are at the point where we could have two, and I'd like one that's not necessarily set at a church,
hmm
but still just trying to figure some of that out. But yeah, I mean, I'm very social, very inclined to like something like Estuary. And I've grown so much, I would say, from being part of Estuary. When I first entered, I would say I was still pretty like entrenched in like left-wing Democrat stuff.
yeah, yeah,
And I still probably lean that way, but
yeah.
my mind is so much more open, and I'm so
Hmm.
much more curious about people who think differently than I do in terms of politics, and feeling like, wait, I feel like we think the same thing, so why does our expression come out so differently? That's
Yeah,
intriguing.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's true. Often the corner sort of gets tagged right, but a lot of the people here have a variety of different political opinions, and a lot of their political opinions have sort of migrated in different directions, and I think you know, that's not that unusual. People do have I mean, just like religious opinions, people have political opinions that are all over the map, and you can talk to someone and they seem like they're all on this side, and then they say this thing, and it's like, oh, that's kind of over there, and most of your other things are grouped over here, and but that's just kind of how people are.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I refer to this little corner as the intellectual light web. That's what I think of it as. So,
so when did you first start going to Estuary with Nate? You just doing stuff together with him, and that's when you started, or
well, it started in our house
oh, well,
during COVID.
well, then you
And
don't have a choice.
yeah, I think maybe the first couple estuaries, or maybe the first couple months I didn't attend. I
Yeah,
would be there, but not necessarily participating. I was like, what is this? You know?
yeah,
Just, I mean, I do think that is something that it's like, again, what we have in common, Nathan and I, is like, uh, just like we're so supportive of each other. Like we
mm,
just when we see that person, like someone is thriving in a particular direction, we encourage that. We do all that we can to kind of support that and to minimize any kind of friction that we can when we see somebody's really developing in a way. So
yeah,
yeah. So that was it felt for me like, oh, this is a really good thing that he's doing. I'm probably not immediately. And again, I would love to get his perspective on it
yeah,
historically. But
yeah, yeah.
yeah. But
Well, and
yeah.
then he took a big hand in the conferences. So, I mean, he really, he really ran the Northwestuary. He had a heavy hand in Southeastuary. So, how is that? And you've attended a whole variety. You're at Midwestuary. So how have you seen the conferences and this thing develop on that level?
Well, I so Chino was kind of the first conference that I went to.
Okay.
And that was also like a thing about as a wife, like it was the first time that I saw people recognize him and like
Yeah.
he had this little miniature celebrity status.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So he it was great to see that. And then I just really liked it. I think that also for me, like um yeah, there's a complicated relationship with Christianity, not personally, but just like how where I when I was coming up as a young Jewish person and all of that, and this kind of like wariness about where people try to convert you and so I had to like learn to drop that and like just really be able
Mm.
to listen. And it was nothing that I had intentionally
Mhm.
implanted in myself. It was something that I had to like learn that I could trust that people were not going to evangelize me. They were not going to, they were curious and
Mhm.
interested. And so, but I really ended up, I mean, I think the first time that we went to church together, I want to say we were in Iowa together, in 20, the very, very early 2020 before COVID. Um, it, we were both, uh, supporting the Yang campaign, Andrew
Oh
Yang's
yeah, yeah,
campaign.
yeah, yeah.
And that felt like a really good intersection
Hmm.
of what we believed. And
Hmm.
so the where we went was this, incredibly Christian Reformed area of Iowa.
Yeah, no, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
People don't recognize how Christian Reformed Northwest Iowa is. It's very Christian Reformed. Yeah.
yeah. And about meeting the people and going to church there and everything, it was like, oh wow, this is so much more open than I
Mm.
had anticipated, and my defenses really got lowered in a good way after
Mm.
that.
Oh,
So
good, good.
yeah, yeah.
So you wanted to do this conversation. Did you have some things in mind? I mean,
Well,
I kind of I like to get the story not only just because it helps others know you, but it helps me know you and have a much better sense of your background and how you got to this place and all that too. But I don't know if you have some things on your mind that you wanted to talk to me about.
well, I think I'm interested in this, like that how to make sure that estuary, when possible, isn't solely Christian, I guess. And it's not that I don't think there's anything inherent in it. It's just sort of the where it has grown out of. And I think that in some ways, like when people ask me like, oh, it's so much men at these conferences in estuary, how does that feel? And I'm like, men really need this. Like women, like we are pretty much we're much better at kind of creating these kind of social
Yeah,
relationships. Not
yeah,
all of us,
yeah,
but I to me it was like, oh, this is really filling a need
yeah,
and it's so healthy and
yeah,
so, just good. Um, so I want that. And I don't know who else needs it. Like maybe it's people who grew up a little bit Christian and are alienated. Maybe it's people who grew up without any specific religious context, but in this larger Christian context. So it makes sense. It makes so much sense that that's in there. And I have
yeah,
no conflict when that's what's being discussed or anything like
yeah,
that. And I've never felt pressured. I think there was like one time at Nathan's church, someone said something to me about messianic, like assuming I was a messianic Jew, and I'm like, no. But aside from that, it's just but so I don't feel like those are the barriers. So I just part of me is like, well, is it that people who have a religious affiliation that isn't Christian don't feel the same need for this? Or is it that they aren't aware of it or they don't feel comfortable? Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, like what kinds of things can be done to make sure that everybody feels comfortable there? Because I don't think it's
yeah.
anything about the structure itself. I
No,
really don't.
no.
Yeah.
It's very open. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the protocol, the format. It's just a conversation mechanism. That's all it is. And there are other ones out there like it. And I think just in terms of this specific movement, it's downstream of me. It's downstream of this whole Jordan Peterson wave where a bunch of people sort of got reconnected with Christianity. But if it were, if you were to start well, John Vendonk's group in Southern California is, even though they meet in the church, they're very diverse in terms of the religious backgrounds of at least the people. Well, see, again, there's the problem. I mean, because if you're holding it in a church, you're probably going to get some church people. If it's sort of people are finding it through the online TLC, this whole thing, then you're going to have a lot of Christians. And so then the other third stream tends to be if you're using meetup.com, you'll get some people from there. But part of what's just difficult is that there are a lot of Christians in the United States.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I'd be curious, to the degree, even in it's again, part of it is just that it's so downstream of me because I think about the German group and hmm, well, let's back this up a little bit and think about this in a different way because you're right in that it is something that men need. And I would imagine if there were zero Christians in the group, you probably wouldn't have the same kinds of dynamics. But I think, because you're dealing with meaning, things are going to get religious.
Yeah.
So one of the guys in Sacramento, Raj, who's been around, I mean, he's Sikh,
Yeah. Yeah, I love
and
Raj.
yeah, and at least Sunday mornings he's often busy with his Sikh temple, but every other estuary group in Sacramento that meets every other time of the week, he's there and he participates. But even for him, part of the interest that gained in my channel was just it's just such a even in a place like Sacramento, which is sort of purplish, it's not as it's not as atheist as the Bay Area, let's say, but you've just got a lot of Christian influence in the culture. And I think once people start talking meaning, they're gonna start dipping into those religious things. And unless there are other religions that are present in the room that are also working at it, I think you're just going to keep pumping into Christians. At least
Yeah.
in North America.
Yeah. And I mean, so I mean, even if I continue to be the only Jewish person, and I haven't exclusively been the only Jewish person to show up at our
Yeah,
estuary group, but in a kind of an ongoing way. Um, I would still participate. I love it. But I think so for me, it's sometimes it's like, okay, so it's not estuary that I'm interested in having an impact on because I think some of it is my interactions and integrations with Christian people who are deeply of faith. Um, are just it there's I have had to just really lower my level of suspicion and concern and
Yeah.
being on guard because that's not I was really brought up to be kind of afraid that I was going to be
Mm,
converted and that was
mm,
the only reason somebody who's Christian would want to interact with me.
yeah.
So learning that that's not the case for the vast majority of
Yeah.
Christians that and
Yeah.
also that I feel like I have a lot in common with people who are of faith, regardless of what faith that is. It's like
Yeah.
I spend time in my community. I am an educator in my community. Attend services, and it's like that takes up, a certain chunk of my life. And so other people who also have that same size chunk, like
Yeah.
we have a lot in common, and we might not agree on like particular issues, but we do share a lot of the same values
Yeah.
and the same like hopes and dreams and wants for our
Yeah.
communities.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would love to figure out how to do that interfaith stuff a little bit. I mean, there are official interfaith organizations that
Yeah.
tend to focus on doing things, but I guess
Yeah.
I'm interested in the like encounter aspect of it.
Hmm.
So I'm just really curious and about that and I feel like I want to be almost an ambassador to
Yeah.
Jewish people for Christians because there is I mean I understand where it all comes from. I totally get that. But
Yeah.
I also think that like we don't need to hold on to things that aren't true anymore. None of us do about anything.
Yeah.
We can adapt and change and see what's different than what we thought. So yeah, so
Yeah.
that's kind of where I'm leaning and
Yeah.
wanting to yeah, I think the other thing is that in terms of my work as someone who works in public health, I see the tremendous benefit of religious institutions,
Yeah.
religious communities, just communities in general, but like so estuary is a really healthy thing in terms of like just like health.
Yeah.
And so is, being part of a religious community. And I think like I grew up, my parents were pretty firm about the idea of separation of church and state, but as somebody
Yeah.
who works in state government, I'm like, no, we don't need to be as afraid of this. We can partner, and there have been lots of things where we're partnering, but I really, really love to work with different faith communities that are trying to figure out how do we incorporate faith, how do we
Yeah.
attach the physical to the spiritual in a way that will make sure that our congregants are not just socially and emotionally healthy, but also physically healthy.
Yeah. I don't know that Hezi has a group in Israel. That would be an interesting experiment. You could, you know, say using meetup.com or something like that, intentionally start. I mean, we haven't explored this a lot, but you could tailor. I mean, if you had a meetup.com group that said, our group would like to talk about you know, the estuary space between formal religions. You're probably going to get a bunch of Christians then too. Um,
Okay.
just because you're in the United States, but we haven't yeah, we haven't really explored it. People have mostly done it to because they felt a need to have a space to talk about, again, it's I intentionally set it up as a secular space. I when I first started, even with the meetups, and of course that developed then into Estuary. I don't open with prayer. I don't. I mean, I use the church building because I have free access to the church building, and we have
Hmm.
parking and all of those things, and it's convenient. But John used a community house in his you know in his trailer park, so. Yeah, yeah, it's a great question, but I mean, it gets into the far deeper questions about the the discussion of religion as such is a modern conversation, and we tend to read it back into our ancient texts because, I mean, my best definition of religion is that which we do to make life work. So when
Hmm.
the Greeks have their temples and the Romans, I mean, it's very clear. We sort of, the a few little the words attached to a few very specific things like bowing down, those things sort of got elevated into religion, but religion didn't come up as a category until there was secularity. And part of the difficulty is that secularity also comes out basically out of, out of the Enlightenment and
Hmm.
Western Christendom. And so then, like when the Brits went to India, they have temples, they have prayers, they have sacrifices, they have, statues, they have all these things. And so the Brits said, well, Hindu was the people, so we just call it Hindu in terms of the religion, even though it's not really a religion. And,
Hmm.
and that big discussion over the New Testament term, Judaismo, it right now the consensus is that would say when the Apostle Paul uses it, he is talking about specific practices that were of Jewish people, and now there's a big discussion about what's the relationship between Judaismo and Israel in the New Testament. That's a thing that's sort of opening up. So it's this is gonna and as secularism sort of amid sort of massive pluralism, secularism continues to get readjusted. This is going to be a big conversation going forward. And when you have a big area of concern in a culture, little conversation groups like estuary groups, people are going to talk about stuff. So, yeah, it's a great tool for getting a small group of people to talk about what they want to talk about. That's essentially what it does.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not the right tool for everything, of course. It's a tool, right?
It's a tool.
Yeah, yeah.
And I try to tell people that. I mean,
Yeah,
it's one little thing. That's all it is. Sometimes people want to make it everything. It's just one little thing to help us. That's all it is.
yeah. I mean, I mean, to me, it's like it's almost like text study in a way. Like it's like people are laying something on the table and then they are examining it. And I feel like that's something that most modern religions have in common is some sort of common text that they bounce off of. And so, I mean, to me, that's valuable, whether it's within your narrow group or or the
Yeah,
larger group. But having something that we agree on, this is what we're going to be talking about. That's really helpful.
yeah,
Yeah, I really also just I keep coming back to this idea of the difference between the Christians who I interact with and the perception of Christianity that I
mm,
encounter, like either in secular or Jewish settings. That's like how, like I really feel called to try to address that in some
mm,
way because I mean, that's in Olympia, it's pretty secular. I mean,
yeah,
we have, it's more secular than religious. And
yeah,
so, I mean, I have people who I work with who just feel like they keep their own religiousness to themselves. They don't
yeah,
bring it to work with them because they're afraid of how people will react. And I don't think that's okay. I mean, I feel like I should be able to bring my full self to work, so they should too, and but it's intricate and interesting to figure
yeah,
that stuff out. But I do have one of the people who I supervise is definitely, deeply religious, and
yeah,
I give her free rein to talk about it, and I,
yeah,
say, yeah, it's great that you're bringing your kids up in the church, and
yeah.
so I'm supportive, but yeah,
Yeah. And this is, I think, going to continue to there was sort of a consensus about where the line is. This is religious, this is not. And I think as we go into the future, those lines are going to be blurred. And even just the observation you made, I mean, when I look at a variety of other religions, I mean, Buddhism, Hinduism, these aren't text-based religions. It's, grows out
Hmm.
of Tanakh, Christianity, Islam. Those are very book-based. And of course, even the conversation of the you know, before the destruction of both temples, to what did you, because obviously the rise of the synagogue, brings everything in when you can't do sacrifices because you don't have a temple. I mean, it's a tremendously difficult um, thing to just sort of get your mind around. Because again, my definition of religion is exceedingly broad. It's basically what you do to make life work. And part of what's being revealed is that over the last, I think, a couple of decades, is that increasingly secularity has what we call secularity has whole ranges of assumptions within it. And you can to a degree see some of that when, let's say, you look at differences between Anglo Enlightenment and French secularity, where France would say, I just saw a video on Quebec and some of what's going on with Quebec, but we know they draft their own new constitution, and one of their rules is that Muslim women may not wear a hijab into public buildings.
Mm.
So that's much more French, sort of the way the French have
Hmm.
approached this. The the Anglo has more been, well, this is going to be an open public space, and you're allowed to wear wear clothing that communicates religious observance in public, and that will be respected. And societies have to work through these things and decide what it's funny with France, especially because for France, of course, before the French Revolution, this gets into the rise of the nation state. I've been reading a lot of 19th century history lately. Before the Revolution, your baptismal certificate in the Roman Catholic Church was your birth certificate. There was no separate
Hmm.
state thing. And so it's only after the French Revolution that, people who are Jews could be also French. Before that, they were just
Hmm.
outside the community. And, part of the painful story of the Jews in Europe has have been, all of these tensions over the years, which then I'm sure multi-generationally breeds in anxiety. It's funny in my story because in my father's family, it wasn't, it was about 2011 when a friend of my father's cousin's son um, did a genealogy on us, and it's like, wow, you guys are really Jewish. And we didn't know. We had clues. My grandfather knew probably, better than he even let his wife know. But they, for some reason, and I don't know if maybe it was because he married a Dutch girl, but he left the Netherlands and he left all of his Jewish family and he emigrated to the United States and he settled among the Dutch and he went to a Reformed church and his eventually my grandfather became a Dutch minister and we just considered ourselves Dutch until like this genealogical thing opened, and then it's like, oh, there's, you know, and the Dutch were living in the northern part of the Netherlands. I'd love to be able to get past that to find out when they went to the Netherlands, because of course the Netherlands were part of this great Habsburg Empire, and
Hmm.
when I mean, the history too is just so complex because so often when the church reconquers Spain, the Jews get out because they had been getting along much better with the Muslims because there are certain ways in which Islam and Judaism get along better because, you don't have the
Mhm.
Trinity and all that. So it's what a history. What a history.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think there's just so much to explore in terms of what does it mean for someone to discover they have Jewish ancestry? Like, is there something essentially Jewish genetically? That's not truly what I believe. Like, I mean, I know it's a reality in some ways, but I don't think that like I don't know. A lot of things that people associate with being Jewish, I think, are way more cultural than they are genetic, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's
Yeah.
that's how I see it. And so to me, I mean, when somebody discovers they have Jewish heritage and they become curious, like maybe they haven't, maybe they didn't. I know quite a few people who grew up kind of maybe kind of thinking they had some Jewish heritage, but went to Catholic school when they were little or that kind of thing, who now are practicing Jews, but to me it's like yeah, if you're curious it's here for you, like no one's going to turn you away, but we're also not going to pressure you at
Yeah.
all, like
Yeah. Yeah.
if you're interested. And I also feel like yeah, even those lines of that all that stuff are not as firm as I think we want to draw them, but it's because of all this historical stuff. It was really interesting. I listened to Sam's uh presentation or what his talk on the history of early Christianity and Judaism and what that was like. And it was very eye-opening, and it
Yeah.
really explained a lot to me about how things evolved. And so, I mean, no one people is free from having done not good things. We
No,
have
that's
all
for sure.
all done not good things. There's no one, I don't think, on earth who could say that their lineage is completely free of sin, whatever you want to call that. Yeah.
If you're alive today, your ancestors were alive to procreate, and chances are they had to do some really nasty things to stay alive. But it was, that was a funny thing for me. So then I went to the Netherlands, my first trip to Europe, and I was there with Job and John Van Donk, and I had had some. I could see some places of birth certificates and things where some of my ancestors had been. And then we found all these Von der Kley, Vanderklei, and that had been the name before Ellis Island sort of made it
Mm-hmm.
Klay for my great grandfather. And so then it was, oh, and then we saw a little bit more of how it was quite clear because there was sort of this just sort of this patrilineal naming that had gone on, and then suddenly there were last names. And in that one family, one of the sons, I think Vanderklay was just a name that some Jewish communities were just taking on because they were told you need another name. All
Mm-hmm.
right, let's pick another name. And they picked this name that basically means of the clay, a very, biblical Genesis. We're made of clay. We're the clay of the earth, so we're of the clay. That's what Vanderklay means. And then of course when the Holocaust comes through and the taking of the Jews from the Netherlands by Germany, and then there's all these Van der Kleys, and then I could, because of genealogies, I could say, oh, these are where my cousins died, Sobibor, and it's a strange thing. It's a strange thing to encounter. And you sometimes feel, well, maybe I should feel a certain way. I don't know how I should feel. I just feel how I
Yeah.
feel. But it's a bizarre thing to be connected into a history that was, you knew some of the history, but now suddenly because you've got, again, because my great great grandfather sent my great grandfather over to Western Michigan, and why they decided to get out of, Friesland and the Netherlands. Um, don't know. Never that nobody ever kept a book in the family and
Yeah.
said, copy this and pass this down. And then when they had these names, these ancestral names when they were first in West Michigan, and then the courthouse burned down, and
Oh,
so they took anglicized names. Um, and those were the names that, I grew up knowing. And it's
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel one one way that I kind of look at it is except for kind of Native Americans and people whose families have been here for, hundreds of years, we are all descendants of people who decided to leave,
yeah,
right? So that's some of the cultural difference between who we are and who are, we're related to in Europe or wherever we're from is the difference. And leaving is doesn't mean
a lot of the Africans didn't decide to leave.
right.
That was an involuntary
No,
immigration.
absolutely. Yes, Africans and then a lot of refugees today, I
Yeah,
wouldn't say necessarily it's a choice,
yeah,
but for the Europeans who left and some other people it was like maybe it was like there's no way we can stay or maybe it's if we stay we're not things are not going to go well or or there's opportunity and I want that opportunity. I mean
yeah,
it's a range, but I do think that culturally there is something different about stayers and goers, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm sure just in terms of temperamental selection, and that stuff does have genetic things that I think part of the reason America is such an energetic country is there were a lot of John Van Dock's calling me at this very moment. There are a lot of there are a lot of goers. There are a lot of, John Van Dock. John Van Dock is I mean, he's an active guy. He's got ideas and he acts on them and he runs with them and on and on and on. So, yeah, yeah.
Well, it's been so great talking with you,
Oh,
and I love the legacy that you have created. So thank you for that.
well, thank you, Sarah Eve, and I'm really glad that I mean Nate tapped me on the shoulder, said my wife would really love to do a Randos. I said, oh, that'd be fun. That'd be really lovely. So, because it's just nice. Again, we know Nate. But this gives us a chance to know you a little bit more, and I think quite likely we'll continue to see more events, and you'll probably be there at those events, and that way people can, I think, probably have a new entree. And the concern you raise is something that my friend Rod Hare raises. He grew up in a Christian home, but he definitely does not identify as Christians for his own reasons. And there are many part of my concern for this overall effort, it's an ironic concern, again, given that I am a Christian minister, and so I am happy with people joining the faith. And I certainly, work at that in a way. I continue to be concerned that over time, it's just the via conversion. It just becomes increasingly sort of a more insular Christian thing. And I designed it to be an open thing because part of how it serves churches even is that it be open because there are plenty of Christian small group methods out there. Don't
Hmm.
really need any more. And I like this because I want to talk to people. I really appreciate my friend Raj. I learn a ton about Siki from Raj and the TLC. I learn a ton from you, Jacob, Joseph, Hezi, and then all kinds of other folks with their backgrounds. So yeah, I share the concern, and I hope we can keep it. Vindonk. He was, at the Southeast Shore. He's saying, yeah, this is just also Christian. And he asked a Christian question. I was like, well, what are you doing? John. I mean, if you want to try to turn the needle to be a little bit more open, and then he asked this question to um, Jordan Daniel Wood about the Eucharist. It's like you just finished telling me it's too Christiany, and then you ask a question about the Eucharist. So
Right. And I mean, I wouldn't expect it to not be considering where it was housed, but I love going to the estuary conferences. I love that environment. I love the people. I always really look forward to it. And I always feel like I'm gonna come back rejuvenated, which is absolutely true. So
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Well,
Okay.
I know you probably have to go back to work, so and I better call John Van Donk. I don't know what latest scheme he has for me now. It's like, he's always got ideas for my life. Paul, why don't you do this? I said, John, why don't you do that? Um, no, but you have a YouTube channel. Well, you should start one, John. I'm not going to start a YouTube channel. All
Yeah.
right, Sarah Eve, you
We'll
take
tell him
care.
I said hello.
I will.
Okay.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.